people to think about that design process to improve the accessible spaces. So it's over to you guys.
Wonderful. Right, let me share my screen in the first instance. Can everyone see that? Is that a nod? Yeah, okay, wonderful. I think what we're going to do in terms of the workshop is just to split up in a couple of into 3 sections. So the first one, Zach's going to be taking us through some general principles about inclusive design and what that means. We'll then break out into a sort of interactive session. So we'd like you to get involved and to start thinking about what inclusive space actually looks like, and we'll run you through that when the time comes, and then Jasmine's going to wrap up with some thoughts as well at the end of that to summarize what we've discussed. It's going to be, quite an informal session. We've got relatively small numbers, so we can feel free to kind of jump in and to ask questions as we go along. And with that, I think I'm going to be quiet and hand over to Zach to kick off.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session. You can go to the next slide, please, Mike. So this is an overview of what we're going to cover today. First, we'll talk about what inclusive design is and who it is for. Then we'll show some examples of what inclusive design looks like. Then we'll look at a school setting and how we might be able to improve that. And then finally, we'll wrap up with what we've learned about inclusive design and answer any questions you might have. Next slide, please. So what is inclusive design? Next slide, please.
Also, sorry, Zach, can I just add that because we've got people that will be watching this later who are visually impaired.
Yeah.
If we've got any images, if you could just describe them as well, please.
Yeah, will do.
Very, very much.
No probs. So inclusive design is about designing things so everyone can use them. We're all different and we need to design things so that they are comfortable, safe, and enjoyable for everyone to use. For some people, the way things are designed can make it difficult or even impossible for them to use it. So there's a picture on the screen of a train station with some wide pass gates. Because they are big, that means that lots of people, including wheelchair users or people with large luggage, can use those pass gates. Next slide, please. So the key principles of inclusive design are: design should be fair for everyone to use so that everyone can enjoy using it. Design should make sense and be simple to use, and design should offer choice in how people can use it. Next slide, please. So when design is accessible, we can say it is safe and usable by everyone. And when design is inclusive, we can say it is not only safe and usable, but also provides an equal experience for everyone. So there's a picture on the screen of a library that shows some stairs and a ramp, which gives access to the bookshelves. So the ramp is safe and usable by everyone, so it's accessible. However, using the ramp will mean it takes longer to get to the bookshelves than using the stairs. And some of the bookshelves are also too high for some people to reach. So the design is not inclusive as it does not provide an equal experience for everyone. Next slide, please.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
Yep.
Also the lighting as well, how does that make it accessible or not accessible? In terms of, I can see the lights on the left-hand side by the books. It's brighter by the books. So does that mean the designers have intentionally put the lights there so that it's a reduction in shadows and people can clearly see the titles? Because if I'm looking at the lights next to the stairs, next to the central pathway, the lights aren't there. So it seems to be clearer. And is that an intentional design process? And that's over to Zach, May, or Jasmine.
Yeah, the lights, the downlights on the books are probably to illuminate the book so that the titles or the spines of the books are easy to read. They're also preferable to, say, uplighters, which can cause lots of glare, which can be uncomfortable in an environment and can make it difficult to see where you're going or temporarily blind someone.
Sorry, what can you just clarify? What's uplighting? Because I've never heard the term.
Okay, uplighting is when the light would be placed towards the ground and be directed upwards.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. So next slide, please. So who is inclusive design for? Next slide, please. So inclusive design is for everyone, but everyone is different. To do inclusive design, we need to know who we're designing for and what their needs are. So for instance, families may need bigger spaces to accommodate buggies. Older people may need more spaces to rest and sit down. Some children may need more calm and quiet spaces, and a wheelchair user may or will need counters and desks at the right height for easy access. So when design meets people's needs, people will be able to use it independently, safely, and comfortably. So next slide, please. So everyone is different, and even people who seem similar may experience the world in different ways. On screen is a list of some different physical and non-physical characteristics people have. And these include vision, hearing, memory, attention, mobility, dexterity, religion, culture, gender, socio-economic background, and many other factors. These characteristics will differ in everyone, and some people may have greater needs relating to one of these characteristics than other people. Some of these characteristics may be permanent, but some might be temporary. So someone with a broken leg, which may be a temporary injury, may find it difficult to move around until their leg is healed. Inclusive design aims to meet the needs of everyone, no matter what their needs are. Next slide, please. So here are a few examples over the next few pages of how we can improve the design of streets and buildings by providing inclusive design. So the picture on the left is of some steps. So we would say this is not inclusive because not everyone can use the steps. On the right is a better option, and that is a picture of a very gentle slope. This is inclusive because most people can use this. Next slide, please.
Can I just
Sorry.
no, hold on. When you're looking at the steps, or when we're looking at the steps, I'm looking at certainly for me, I've probably got size 9.5 feet in England, whatever that's about 43, 44. So if I'm looking at that, that's not a particularly narrow or deep or high step. Now, when you're looking, so are some steps more or less inclusive? Because I've been to Amsterdam many, many years ago, and some of the steps in Amsterdam are scary for me, to be honest about it. And also, if you're going to castles, you know, these windy things. So are there some steps that, although they're not as inclusive or accessible, that are less so? And how does that, it's an open question again. Can steps be designed that they're slightly more inclusive? Or do they then become more ramp orientated?
I suppose steps are inherently not inclusive because not everyone could use them. Steps could be made safer and easier to use, so people who can use them may find them more comfortable. So things like having the handrails, having a tread, sorry, not a tread, a nosing to the end of the step, just to emphasize the contrast between steps, so people know where to put their feet. Trying to think of anything else.
No, I was just wondering, because I say steps are steps. Go on.
I was just going to add to what Zach said, and in relation to what you were asking, David, about I suppose the size of someone's foot when they're actually using the steps. So there is guidance across different regions about you know, how deep those steps should actually be, and there's a relationship between the depth of the step and the height of it to make sure that it's a comfortable walking sort of pattern, or it fits in with the comfortable walking patterns of people, and that people are less likely then to kind of trip over the step, or to you know, for it to be massively uncomfortable for people when they're using it. So there are rules that will differ across different regions because of the fact that people, you know, the average size of a person will differ across different countries, but there are guidelines to help make that safer.
Who sets those guidelines? Is that an international, or is that an engineering thing, or is that a national? Who sets those guidelines, and where, for instance, could people or schools look up those guidelines if, when they're working with organisations like us, like our own?
So a combination of different things, actually. So there may be guidelines that have been set by government that are integrated within sort of the laws and the building regulations within that country. There may be things, government departments that specialise in, so in the UK we've got a Department for Education as an example, and they've separately set you know, guidelines and parameters in you know, in relation to school environments. There may be some independent bodies that, so lots of guidance from universities, from organisations like Arup, where independent research has been conducted, and there may be additional considerations that come out of those types of studies. So yeah, huge amount of information that's available, and it depends on where you are and who's been doing the work within your region.
Thank you very much for that, for clarification.
All right. Back.
Yep. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is of an uneven cobbled street. This is not inclusive because some people may struggle to keep their balance on the uneven surface and may trip or fall. Instead, the picture on the right is more inclusive. This is a smooth, firm surface, which would be safe and comfortable for most people to use. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is of a single narrow door that will need strength to open. We'd say this is not inclusive because some people may need more space to get through the door, or may not be strong enough to turn the handle. Some people may not be able to reach the handle either. Alternatively, the picture on the right is of an automatic double door. This is inclusive because it will be wide enough for most people to get through, and it doesn't need someone to push or pull a heavy door. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is of a counter in a cafe, which is very high. This is not inclusive design because it would be too high for some people to use. And it's not a very good relationship between whoever's behind the counter and, say, someone who was seated on the opposite side of the counter. The picture on the right is of a lower height counter. This is more inclusive because both standing and seated people can use it and have a more equal or equitable experience. They have the same experience when they're using it. Next slide, please. So the picture on the left is of fixed seating in rows in a classroom. This is not inclusive because not everyone will be able to access the seats. There's probably not enough room behind the seats. And people might have different needs in terms of how much space they need to sit, or if they have anything with them that is, the seats aren't very flexible to accommodate that. So alternatively, the picture on the right is of a classroom with individual seating for students. So seating can be changed and there is enough room between seats for people to move around. But this is inclusive because it can be flexible for different people's needs. Next slide, please.
Sorry, can I just pause you?
Sorry.
Can you just go, no, it's fine. I'm also looking at the on the slide on the left-hand side where it wasn't as inclusive.
Yeah.
How would the acoustics work as well? Because I'm just looking, if I was the person on the far back on the right, it's more in shade. So I'm just looking at the lighting. Also, I'm wondering when we're talking about physical inclusiveness, I'm just thinking about the auditory side of things, the noise. How would those spaces be supportive of people who have got, let's say, for instance, tinnitus?
Yeah, you're exactly right. A big space like this would probably be more echoey. Sound would not travel as far, so if you were at the back, you might struggle to hear. And things like reverberation can be very painful for people who may have a hearing aid in. So yeah, there are many different aspects of this design that are not particularly inclusive.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Yeah, next slide, please. So the picture on the left is of a small toilet cubicle. It's not particularly inclusive because there's not much space. So if someone was in a wheelchair, they wouldn't be able to transfer to the toilet very easily or safely. It's also missing some important facilities such as a sink. Alternatively, the picture on the right is of an accessible toilet. So it's much bigger than a standard toilet and has grab rails on either side of the toilet for wheelchair users to transfer to the toilet safely. This is inclusive because it can meet the needs of lots of different people.
Again, can I ask you about the inclusive toilet? If I look at the flushing mechanisms on actually the inclusive and not inclusive one, you've got a physical pushing flushing mechanism. I mean, from what I've seen and from you know, I presume it's slightly more inclusive if people had that. I forgot what it's called, when you wave your hand over something and it automatically flushes, because people might have issues with the amount of effort needs to push to flush the toilet or not. Is that, how does that work? Sorry.
No, yep, that's absolutely correct as well. Pushing the flush button, some people might not have the dexterity or strength to do that, or might find that fiddly or difficult to access depending on the control they have of their limbs. You do have flushes that are sensor activated, but they can be quite uncomfortable or unsettling for people, say, who have cognitive difficulties, just because they might shock the person. So the waving operation for a flush would be very inclusive because you're in control of it, and it doesn't obviously require much strength or excessive complexity to use.
Thank you.
No worries. Yep. Next slide, please. So why should we do inclusive design? Well, ultimately, inclusive design means we work together with different types of people, and we can identify the different barriers that exclude people from using and enjoying buildings and spaces. When we do this, we can also understand what people need and how we can design for different needs, so we can create places that everyone can use and enjoy. Next slide, please. So now we know what inclusive design is, who it is for, and some examples of inclusive design. Let's try to make a school more inclusive.
Wonderful. So I think this is the point that I'm going to attempt to swap. Yes, here we are. Can everyone see a new, there's a diagram or a drawing of a school on the screen now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, wonderful. So as Zach said, what we want to do is to get your thoughts really as to, oh, sorry, clicked on the wrong one. Yeah, to get your thoughts as to how we can design this to be more inclusive. So on the screen, what we have is a sort of rectangular shaped school. At the top of the building, we've got a sign to say school. There are two entrances. One of the entrances is red. There's a flight of stairs that go up to that entrance, and there's handrails to both sides of that stair. On the opposite side of that, there is a green door, and there's some steps leading up to that as well. There's some cobbled paving at the front of those steps, but there's no handrails provided. Off to the side of the school, there's also a sign that says no dogs allowed. So I just wanted to hear from all of you on the call. What sort of things do you think we can do to this school that can make it more inclusive? And what you can do is either unmute yourself and kind of shout out any thoughts that you've got, if you feel comfortable doing so. And if not, you can drop some messages in the chat box as well. And Jasmine and Zach will have a look at those and read them out for you. So completely up to you.
I've got one, if
Yep.
you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
No dogs allowed. People maybe who have vision impairments and have assistant dogs.
Yeah.
That could definitely be one.
Wonderful. So shall we get rid of the sign then?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Or even better, you could change it to dogs allowed on premises.
So dogs allowed on premises. I think that's a very good point, because as you say, we might have guide dogs, we might have emotional support animals, all kinds of circumstances where actually that sign could be very could present a huge barrier to people to actually enter into the space. I think there's a hand up from is it Mia?
Yes, hello.
Hi there.
Sorry, I joined a little late.
No worries.
If the student was supposed to be, or if a student is in a wheelchair, then I don't think stairs are the best way for that child. So even with rails, that can be a little difficult.
Yeah.
So maybe we could get rid of the stairs completely and then have a slope so any student could walk in or use a wheelchair to climb up, into the school. Thank you.
That's a great idea. So I've gotten rid of the steps now. So let's quickly put in a slope instead. Wonderful. And let's move that over, or let's duplicate that so that we've got that on that side as well. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Any other thoughts from people?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, you go, it's all right.
I'm not very sure, but let me just say this. The colors, I think some people might be colorblind and might be difficult for them to differentiate which one is red or green. That's an observation. Yeah.
Absolutely. So what could we do instead then? I'm thinking if the red and green was supposed to was included to try and direct perhaps students to one door and staff to another, then what could we do instead of using color to indicate that?
The way we indicated dogs allowed on premises, we can also put cues that probably this is a red door, this is a green door, or we could just make the colors neutral colors. I don't know.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's a good idea. So if we were to, so let me do this first. So if we were to have a neutral color for the door there and there, and then as you say, similar to the dogs allowed, we've got signage to actually indicate what the use of that is. So if I students, wonderful. That's a little bit too big. Let me just quickly change that. Okay, perfect. That sounds good. Any other thoughts from people?
In terms of the cobblestones in front of the student's door, it might be better just to have a flat pavement or concrete in terms of if there are people with visual impairments and they have a walking cane.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get rid of those horrible cobblestones. There we are.
Really quick question. How difficult is it to get rid of cobblestones from a design perspective? Is it or not? Is it hard or easy?
It depends on the scheme. So I think sometimes they are, there's a requirement to keep the cobblestones because of the fact that it's historic. There's conservation reasons for keeping those. So in some instances, it's quite difficult to be able to change that. But what we can do instead then is to provide an alternative. So where we had the sort of cobblestones here, if we had a council, a local council, or if we had someone saying, actually, these are really important because of whatever reason, and we need to keep them, then what we could always do is keep some of them perhaps off to the side, but repurpose them somewhere, but maybe create a path that allows people to access the ramp without having to interact with the cobblestones. Or in the worst case, if it did have to cover the whole of that area, then we'd be looking at alternative routes into the building. So instead of restricting it to staff only in this entrance, we could open that up so that people have another option. Right. Any other thoughts from people as to what we can do to change this? And if not, I'll move on to the next exercise. Oh, yeah.
Suggestion within the chat to potentially use some braille.
Yes, that is a very good idea. What I'm going to do is put that as a note to the side, because I'm not going to be able to draw that very well at all. So braille for signage as well. Yes, that's a very, very good suggestion, because not everyone, despite the fact that we've gotten rid of the colours, we've put the the signage on there, not everyone will necessarily be able to see the signage. So having the braille means that we've got something that people can touch and still understand what they're using.
To take it one step further, if you look at maybe not very ethical in terms of socio-economical, depending on where this school is, you could potentially do sliding doors, like Zach was saying before in the presentation, and still have that neutral tone or braille and signage off to the side as well. Or even push or pulls on the door handle to that affordance of action.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So again, I might put this as a note just because, and I'll try and draw that up for everyone afterwards, but let's put that down. So automatic door and signage to the side. Wonderful. Anything else? Yeah.
I have a small doubt. When we speak about inclusivity, are we only talking about physical or mental impairments, or does it include sexual orientation and things that are not that accepted as well?
Absolutely, yeah. So inclusive design, I think we've it's in the broader sense that you can think of. So it will include, as you say, sexual orientation, gender identity. It will include age as well, because different people at different within different age groups will require very different things, and how we can combine that as well. So thinking about if you've got staff who might be in their 50s or 60s versus a student who might be 3 or 4, then again making sure that we've got that balance.
Then I think it might be best if we could have the pride flag or ribbons or something, stuff that actually make people feel accepted. When it comes to a school, I'm a student, and I understand that not many people are accepted at their home for who they love or accept. So maybe we could add pride flags, and then if the kids who come in have any diseases, say AIDS, maybe we could add ribbons and then make it more inclusive in that way as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I think that's a really lovely idea. Perfect. Any other thoughts from anyone else? Cool. Wonderful. In which case, I'm going to go on to the next one there then. Like I say, I'll have a little play around and try and draw up some of those things and share that with you afterwards. But what I wanted to just quickly touch on before we get to the next exercise is just about architectural drawings. And so what I've tried to do is, so on the screen, I've got an avocado. And I just wanted to talk through what an elevation is. So an elevation is, if you imagine standing in front of a building, it's what you can see, and that's what you represent on the drawing. So for this avocado, this is what I've got here. That's what I can see if I'm standing face on to it, and that's therefore the drawing that's there. for a plan, this is what, so if you imagine being a bird flying above the top of the building, that is what a plan is. So it's what you can see when you're looking directly above. And for architectural drawings, what we tend to do is take the roof off so that we can actually see what's inside the building, because that tends to be much more useful. So for the avocado, I've gone up to the top of it, I've sliced it off, and then that's my plan of the avocado. And I've got the same example again with a butternut squash. So that's the elevation, what I can see when I'm looking straight at it. And then the plan when I slice the roof off and look at it from a bird's eye view. Lexi, did you have a question?
Just in regards to talking about that plan with talking with architectural structures. So would that be like a floor plan?
Exactly, yeah. Cool. So this is the inside of the school that we just saw. So what you would have seen before is the elevation of the school building with the two entrances that we can see here. And this is the plan. So what we can see in this plan is off to the left-hand side, we've got an auditorium, or an assembly hall, sorry, rather than auditorium. So an assembly hall, we've got some seats that are laid out to the left-hand side. We've got a set of stairs that take you to the back rows of the seats, and then we've got a screen and a presentation area at the front of the assembly hall. To the right-hand side, immediately after you enter the building, we've got a reception area for staff and students to kind of speak to the receptionist and to sign in. And then we've got 3 rooms that are in front of you once you enter the building. So the first room right at the back is a classroom. There are 3 tables and 3 seats on each of those tables. We've got a dining room, which has a table and 8 seats. And then we've got a self-service food area at the front of that. And then off to the right-hand corner, we've got a toilet as well, which is, there's a toilet, there's a sink, and then we've got a door that swings into that space. So again, same question again, what can we do to make this much better for different people? Lexi.
Definitely across all the different rooms, I think space is rather an issue.
Yeah.
For example, with the classroom, all those desks and seats are very close to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And same with the dining room, they're very close to the door and the entranceway, as well as the food service area. So maybe reducing the number of seats that are in that room, or shortening desks into individual ones so they can be moved around.
Absolutely. So for the moment, in order to reduce, or in order to represent what you've just said there, let me reduce the number of reduce the number of tables, as you said, and also then space this out a little bit so that people are actually able to get to their seat, and to make sure that they are able to kind of move around and to learn, be in that learning environment in a much more comfortable way. Likewise then for this one, so again, if I were to change this to a 6-person, for the dining room, if I change that to a 6-person table instead, it means that we've got a little bit more space for someone to actually get past the table when they enter the dining room, and to actually use the food area. Wonderful. Any other thoughts from people?
Sorry, can I just add, because I'm not sure how to put my hand up, is that when you're reducing the amount of people in the food serving area, does that mean that people, because I'm thinking about my own kids' schools, does that mean there'd be flexibility in terms of so like the timetables for the children and the year groups to come along? So rather than saying we're going to have one long lunch, what they might do is, because they're improving the accessibility within the food serving area, what they'll do is they'll manage more of the flow within that food serving area, and actually get less people, and just also work out and calculate the number of covers that people would have within that particular time period. Does that make sense or not?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think one of the really important things of inclusive design is thinking about not just physically what we're providing within the building, but as you said, David, how people are actually using that building and managing and operating within that space as well. So as you say, because we've got a reduced capacity within the, within the seating itself, what we can look at is, as you say, how we actually get people, out of their classrooms into the food, be flexible with the timetable. We could always as well look at other spaces that might be available within the school. So if they've got a garden outside in the summertime, or when the weather's nice, we can look at outdoor seating areas that can just widen that space and make sure that people still have that opportunity to speak with their friends, to speak with their peers. So yeah. So I've got 2 hands up. I'm not sure who was first, Mia and Lexi.
Mia, you first. Had your hand up.
I was about to say, Alex, you can go first. So I was thinking, because the reception area is that close to the door, we could maybe break it into 2. So one half, so nobody has to go behind the door and then enter such a congested space. Maybe we could break it into 2 so that more people can be employed in that area. Also, it can be a little more inclusive. Anybody can come up and ask, even if they're on a wheelchair or have a walking stick, or even if they're teachers or children, it can be more accessible in that way.
Absolutely. So what sort of shape reception area do you think we should break that up into then?
For me personally, I think a circle or a square works, but looking at the shape of it, I think a square might be better.
Square. Okay, cool. Let's go with that. So let's get rid of this reception desk here, because as you said, Mia, it's not going to be very nice for someone who's working within that space as well. It's going to be really cramped, really quite uncomfortable. And as you said, it's so close to the door. If someone happens to be waiting in this area and someone else comes in the door at the same time, then they're going to get a very nasty injury. So let's move this over. So we've got a reception, the reception sort of desk here, clear of the door. Still got lots of space here to walk past, and lots of space at the back here as well for the reception staff to be working in. Wonderful. Lexi.
To do some remodeling with the bathroom, it might be beneficial to instead having the toilet facing like southwards, maybe put it on the eastern wall. For people who may have a wheelchair, they have more space to maneuver in that area.
Yeah.
And then even with the door as well, maybe have it opening outwards, or even a sensor door that can lock from the inside with those wave panels that David was talking about before. And that also is then more hygienic in terms of use, and students with keeping germs and all, especially with coronavirus, touching surfaces at bay. And then we think potentially using a sink that's got the tap in the center of the basin, so it's easier to use. And then maybe even one with a sensor as well for, again, hygiene.
Wonderful. That's a great idea. So again, I'll draw this up properly afterwards, but what we're saying then is the toilet on the east wall.
Yes.
And the sink, did you say?
You could maybe even move the sink further towards the southern wall to give some more space in between both, and potentially moving the tap head into the center of the basin.
Yeah, makes sense. Wonderful. I think that's a great idea. Let's move this further south then. Wonderful. Perfect. Any other thoughts from people?
Because I don't know how to put my hand up. What about the design of the sinks and also the toilet roll holders and the flushing mechanism? Can you talk us through that, please?
Yeah, of course. So again, one of the things that we would be for a toilet that is suitable for a wide range of people to use, what we'd be looking for is that that all of the facilities within the toilet are equally easy to use as well. So for the toilet roll holder, that would need to be easy for someone to use when they're seated on the toilet. It needs to be within reach. It needs to be safe so that when people are reaching for the toilet roll, that you know, they're not overreaching, so that, you know, there's a risk of someone falling. Sorry, I've forgotten what the other item that you mentioned there, David. I was talking
no, it's right. It's the flush, and it's also the washing your hands. The actual, it's because taps are all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and also schools have got to think about the stuff being broken realistically. So I presume there's a big choice between somebody buying a domestic tap and its utility and how many times it's used a day, compared to somebody in an industrial setting, particularly in a school setting where you've got potentially hundreds, if not thousands, of kids using this every single week. How does that work in terms of, on an industrial basis, in terms of schools, let's say, or those?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the in terms of the flush, if we deal with that very quickly, again, what we would typically say is that if we put it on the side where there's most space, then it means that regardless of someone's body shape or size, regardless of whether or not they're using additional equipment as well. So if they're a wheelchair user, if they've got walking aids, it means that you've got plenty of space once you finish using the toilet to actually reach the flush. So that's the first one. In this particular one, it wouldn't make sense for us to put it in that corner here. Because it would mean someone essentially having to get into that tiny space between the toilet and the wall. So for this example, we'll put it on this side over here instead. I think as you mentioned, I think it was something like Lexi had mentioned about moving the tap so that it's more central. And I think that's a really great idea, because it means then that people are able to, you know, again, there's plenty of space for someone to, you know, potentially swivel around and to use the sink, have good reach of the tap itself, and to use that whilst they're still seated as well. And so we're reducing the risk of someone potentially falling over. We're giving people the opportunity to use the tap and to make sure that their hands are clean before they transfer back into a wheelchair, as an example. Yeah, it's much more inclusive that way. I think touching on the point that you made there, David, about you know, a space like a school where there's lots of people kind of using it on a day-to-day basis, we need to make sure that the products that we're using are very durable, they're hard wearing, they're easy to clean as well. And I think with the pandemic, with COVID, you know, it's especially important that, you know, that those surfaces that people are touching on a day-to-day basis would be hygienic and safe for people to use. The drawing only has the one toilet, which is very unrealistic, but and also only one classroom as well. So it's a very, very small small school in a very small town, I think, that we're using as an example here. But yeah, having more than just the one choice would definitely help as well, because it means that people aren't waiting for long periods of time to use the toilet. There's choice. We can, I think some of the points that Mia had made earlier about other inclusion considerations as well. If we've got more than one toilet, it means that we can potentially have a choice of male toilets, female toilets, non-gendered toilets as well, to suit different identities, suit different requirements from a cultural perspective as well. So thinking about those kind of things. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I realise I've talked a lot.
No, it does. Should we move to, as Jasmine pointed out, should we move to the hall and then call it a wrap? Because you guys have been phenomenal. It's the thing, because I'm a former primary school teacher, and my big thing, because I worked from nursery kids, very, very young ones, to taller ones, and the classic one for me about that screen is you've got people sitting on the floor and really hurting their neck as they're looking at the screens. And then the other classic one is where the screen might be, where the light is, and how that might impact people's ability to actually see it. And again, I remember numerous children getting told off purely and simply because they're fidgeting because they can't see the screen, and it's not their fault, it's just where the screen is, and it's that accessibility to the light. So could you talk us through how you guys think about that, or how that design process is done?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think lots of really great points there, David. So I think, as you say, the lighting needs to be suitable for the type of space that we're actually designing. So if people are, there's different types of light that can help with concentration, different types of light and lighting conditions that can help with, just when people need to focus on particular tasks. So making sure that we're working with someone who's a specialist in that area, and making sure that we design the right type of lighting. The screen, as you said, we really need to be thinking about how people are going to be viewing it. And so there's certain things that we can think about, if it's the seating as an example, whether people are sitting at the bottom row or whether they're sitting at the top row, making sure that the angle of their head, and this goes back to a conversation that I think we were having just before the session started, actually, about ergonomics, thinking about what the sight line is, thinking about what the comfort levels are of someone actually, the viewing angle, and what's comfortable, what's a comfortable range, and thinking about people who might sit outside of that sort of average as well, and designing it so that we can try and create as much choice, I suppose, as possible in order to accommodate that. Yeah.
If I may add to that about the hall,
Mhm.
can we break the hall into 2 different parts so we can have 2 different screens? And I think with that, there will be more spacing between the seating arrangement.
Mhm.
And it's a small school, I suppose, so I don't think we will have a lot of kids. If
Mhm.
that's the case, we could avoid the stairs as well.
Yeah, sounds brilliant. So if I get rid of that, there's no too many things gotten rid of that. So yeah, if I get rid of those, and then, like you say, we can split that up, then it means that, yeah, potentially what we can always do is have, if we're duplicating those screens, then I think, going back to David's point as well, we can potentially have one at a slightly different angle, different height to the other, so that, again, people are able to choose which one they prefer, and which one is more comfortable for them, and sit on the right, sit on the side of the room that accommodates that. So no, too many things again. Yes, I'll. Trying to do this live is.
This is a lovely piece of software. I mean, it's brilliant what you're doing. It really, really is.
It is, if I can select the right bits.
That's right. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I'll move those overlays.
Everybody know, no, it's absolutely fine. I'm sure people know. Is that right? Arat, May, Jasmine, and Zach have really given a huge amount of time. And we've had an hour of their time. Mia and Lexi, have you got any questions at all from them?
Not at this stage, no.
Yeah.
Same here, no, but I've just had a realization that the format of what you have shown is exactly how my school works, and I think a lot of schools I know work. So it just opened my eyes to how non-inclusive most of the buildings that we have are, and it's a little sad in that way that most people can't access it.
Which country are you in?
I am from India.
And you're saying
Yeah.
the schools are, I mean, how old are the buildings?
So I come from Kerala, and we have the highest literacy rate. So everybody is in schools. So schools come up, I mean, they're built very often because we have a good population as well. And parents really want to enroll their kids in school. So school buildings, they pop up very, very easily, but the inclusivity factor is not so much. And I think if you are a special child in that terms, then there's a special school, but enrolling them in a normal school with kids who are not so special, it's not that much.
And do you go to a private school or do you go to a state school?
It's the same.
Really?
Everywhere.
Wow.
Yeah. I am a uni student. I'm a student social worker. So yeah, it's the same.
Got it. Right. Is there anything else, or I'll stop recording and then pause recording? Yeah, recording. If I stop recording now, have you guys got any other questions, or I'll stop recording?
None from me. Thank you.
Me neither. Thank you.